Good morning. All right, we got a change of plans. Things happen. I don't know where Recology is, so hopefully Laura will show up from Recology. So we're going to start first with Cedar Grove. Thank you for coming. This is going to be video recorded in case you want to watch it later, because there's always a lot of information. And one thing I wanted to mention that Barbara and I were talking about earlier, a lot of people's confusion with what to do with composting and recycling have to do with where you may have lived before Horizon House, which would have maybe had different rules than what's here at Horizon House. That can be affected by what city you live in, what state, even what city within Washington State, what city you live in, and whether it's residential or commercial. Guess what we are? So, good guess. So just to think about that, it doesn't really matter what you were doing before. What matters is what we do here at Horizon House. Okay? So we're going to start off with Cedar Grove. Come on up and talk, Sierra.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, everybody. It's always a pleasure coming back and being able to speak face-to-face with you all and try to answer as many questions as I can, because there's always questions. But yes, my name is Sierra. I'm with Cedar Grove Composting. I've been with the company 2 years now, and my main role is to help educate our customers to make sure they know what is accepted in the compost process. So if you've seen this presentation before, nothing much has changed. So. Here's kind of a timeline of Cedar Grove. Just a reminder, we are a local family-owned company. So we are in our third generation of ownership, and we've been in the area since 1938. So 50 years now. Well, math, you do the math. We've been around the block for a while now. And started as a garbage company, switched to recycle, and then in 1989, there you go, in 1989 is when we started recycling organic waste. So we opened up our first composting facility in Maple Valley, and then in 2004, the city of Seattle asked us to start taking food waste. So to accommodate that extra flow, we built our second facility. So we have one in Maple Valley, one in Everett, and between the two, we divert over 350,000 tons of organic material every year. And that is actually a pretty outdated number. I know last year alone, it was over 500,000 tons. And now there's a state law requiring organics recycling, so that number is only projected to get higher, which is exciting to get all that food waste out of the landfill, but also terrifying because nobody knows what's accepted outside the city of Seattle. So we have a lot of education to do on our end. So first, friendly reminder of why it's so important that we do this. In the corner is a picture, if you can see that. They look like little black things, but on the inside they're orange. Those are carrots. And those carrots have been in the landfill for over 10 years. They have a black kind of coating on the outside, but when you break them open, they're still bright orange. They still hold their form. And it's important to know that your food waste, when it goes to the landfill, it all gets piled up with all the other stuff you send to the landfill. It does not get oxygen or water to break down. Therefore, it will hold its form for over a decade. And it emits a gas called methane, which is 30 times more likely to trap in heat than carbon dioxide. So it's emitting methane, attributing to greenhouse gases, and with that, so many negative impacts. That food waste impacts the groundwater, impacts soil health, and of course aids to the increasing size of the landfills. And about 30 to 40% of what we send to the landfill is organic matter that we can fully divert. So a solution to this is composting, where we can recycle that organic waste and give it another life. Now, composting alone is already such a huge benefit and solution. However, with this, there are so many other benefits, which we'll get into a little bit later. Here are just some statistics. As I mentioned, between the two facilities, we divert over 350,000 tons. We are a commercial hauler, meaning we only haul from businesses directly. So from Horizon House, from restaurants, from schools. However, we are the local composter in the area, so we also receive a lot of residential waste as well. Now, from Horizon House alone, in 2023, you guys diverted over 67 tons, so closer to 68 tons worth. If anybody wants to Google what kind of animal that would be, I want to say that's close to a whale. So you diverted over a lot of material. And I did look recently, last year in 2024, it was 69 tons. So you're increasing over the years, so kudos to you guys. So as I mentioned, we're a commercial hauler. So we are only going to be talking about commercial businesses, so here at Horizon House, what you can put in your food waste bin. And because we are a commercial hauler, we have large compost piles, and we compost on a massive scale. The bigger the compost piles are, the hotter they get. And the hotter they get, the more material you can take. That is why we can take bones, raw meat, post-consumer food waste, and certified compostable packaging. So before we get into that, let's review what is compostable. All food. We want it all. We want your bones and your shells and your raw meat and that burger that's been in your fridge for 2-3 months and you're scared to open it. We want that. Even if you get a bunch of peanut butter and you find out that it's recalled and it has all that bad bacteria that would be bad for us, we still want it in the compost because even though it's bad bacteria, it's still helpful for our process. So what we really don't want, food-wise, is any liquids or oils. So make sure you are getting rid of those materials properly. And why we really don't want any liquids is mainly because when the driver comes to service that container, they dump it, and if it has a lot of liquid, it will just seep onto the ground. And it creates an environmental hazard because it's mixed with your food waste. So making sure that you're putting your liquids in the correct area. Next is food soiled paper. So try to keep this as simple and as basic as possible. This is your paper plates, napkins, paper towels, your little Splenda packets or sweetener packets that are made from paper. If it's basically an uncoated paper product that has food on it, put it in the compost. So coffee filters, that sort of thing, greasy pizza boxes. All clean and dry paper and cardboard should go where? The recycle, correct, for the next best highest use. However, when that paper or cardboard is food soiled, that grease immediately starts eating away at that paper and that cardboard. So if you put it in the recycling, it will not be able to be put back together the same way. So for this is why we put it in the compost. Now, key things to keep in mind when it comes to paper products. We really don't want paper products with cleaning products on them. So let's say you spill something. You want to Clorox your counter, and you get a paper towel and you clean it up. We don't want that in the compost. Can anybody tell me why we don't want that? It kills bacteria. Cleaning products are antibacterial. Composting is a natural microbial process. It'll just kill our good and bad bugs. So we really don't want that. And next is we don't want any paper towels with bodily fluids. So that means when you blow your nose, things like that. And it's not because our piles can't cook out those germs. They can. That's not an issue for us. It's mainly because the public does not want to buy compost if they know there are tissues in it. So that's more of a personal preference. So when it comes to food and paper, put it in the compost. Now last is, aside from yard waste, we love and want all the yard waste, approved compostable packaging. Now this is a very tricky conversation to have because it can be very confusing. So because of how many different types of compostable products there are on the market, there's so many that are greenwashed. Does anybody know what greenwashed means? Or greenwashing? Faking it. It's basically when companies put a leaf or a tree on a packaging item, they say it's good for the planet without doing any testing to make sure it can break down in any process. So because of this, Washington State came out with a law requiring that compostable packaging have identifiers so that you all can easily identify and trust that that item is compostable. Does anybody remember from our last session what those 3 identifiers are? What to look for on your coffee cup or your fork? Yeah.
It's gotta have brown on it somewhere, it's gotta have green on it, and it's gotta have numbers.
Yeah, so it has to have a color component. One of it being the 3 accepted colors for compost are brown, green, and beige. The item has to have one of those 3 colors on its body. Either the whole thing is that color, or it has to have a band or a stripe. So if you have compostable forks or knives that are black and white, do those have those 3 colors on them? No. So they are no longer accepted in the compost. Now, let's say you have forks and knives that are brown, and they say compostable. Do those have the 3 colors? Yeah, because they're brown. So that would be an item you can put in the compost. So color is one component. The second component is the word compostable. Now, this is important. A lot of companies were using verbiage like biodegradable or plant-friendly or carbon neutral. That's very confusing for the public. This verbiage is now prohibited in the state of Washington. So the only accepted word on compostable packaging is the word compostable. So you have the color, you have the word compostable, and the last thing is it has to have a stamp of approval from a third-party certifier. Our third-party certifier is CMA. This stamp right here says Compost Manufacturing Alliance. This is a certification stamp. The most common one on your material is, does anybody know what that common stamp is? BPI. So if you see your bowls and your to-go boxes, they'll usually have a little symbol on there that says BPI certified. That is a certification, meaning that bowl was tested by a separate party to make sure it breaks down in a compost process. So your identifiers for compostable packaging, the color, brown, green, or beige, the word compostable, and the third-party stamp of approval. Now, we have worked closely with your dining staff, and they have done an amazing job transitioning a bunch of your stuff. Round of applause for them. I don't know if they're here. So they have tried to make it as easy as possible for all of the materials in your cafeteria to be compostable. And I know there are some things that are just tricky to substitute because there just aren't any options available. But for the most part, most of that material can go in the compost. Question?
I'm confused about something you said. Does it have to have all 3 of those items or just one of the 3?
So it has to have all 3. However, there are items that are too small to have all 3. So like straws. Straws, it's hard to have the word compostable and the stamp of approval. So for that one, what color are your straws here?
Green.
They're green. Okay, so that is an accepted color. And by the law, no plastic items can have that color. So it has to be compostable by law. So keep that in mind as well. Yes?
What if it's soiled? What if the container is soiled
With food?
with food?
Well, that's perfect because we want that food waste. The main reason why we kind of want compostable packaging is for what? To get that food waste. That's kind of the main purpose of making compostable packaging. So when it's soiled with food, that is perfect. Yeah.
Back to your soiled paper, what if the cardboard has a coating on it? Often they do. It looks like plastic. It's hard to tell.
What cardboard? Can you give me an example of what it is?
Well, if you get a takeout box from a restaurant, it's brown, but very often it's shiny as well on the inside. It's not clear.
Sure, like a brown paper box that has a coating on it.
Right.
So that would be something that would fall under compostable packaging.
It would.
Right.
If it says compostable.
So then if it was a brown box and it's compostable packaging, it would have to have the other two identifiers. And most of the brown boxes you can find at like PCC have that little band on there and have the certification. So when it comes to paper products, try to keep it paper towels, coffee filters, paper plates. If you have an item that is not obviously a paper plate or a napkin, it is then considered compostable packaging. Is that helpful? Okay. Yes. Wax paper. So do you mean like baking sheets, or what? Can you give me an example of wax paper? Is it for baking though? Oh, okay. So if it's like a paper that's wrapped in food waste, kind of like that checkered one? If it's waxed paper, then most likely it's not just paper, right? There's a coating on it. So if there's a coating on it, then it would have to be something that would have to be certified. It is then treated as compostable packaging. So for example, your butter, it's not just paper, right? So it shouldn't be treated as something that you can put in the compost because it's not just a basic paper. It would be something that would have to be trashed if it doesn't follow the guidelines for compostable packaging. And I get a lot of questions about parchment paper or baking paper, things you bake cookies on. Now, what is the purpose of the paper? It's non-stick, and it's made to what? Resist heat, right? It's not supposed to burn in your oven. So right there, that kind of material will already have a very hard time breaking down in our compost because it's made to withstand heat. I'm going to answer one more question, and then we'll move on.
Toilet paper that's may have face oil or may have urine on it. Is that, it used to be compostable, but is it still compostable?
Who can answer that for her? Why? Why is it not compostable? It has bodily fluids on it. We don't want bodily fluids. Only food waste, food soiled paper, and yard waste in the compost. Okay. Now, color is really important. These are examples of compostable packaging dumped at our tipping building. Now, before the law, there was just coffee cups and different colored black and white plastic and compostable forks and white containers, and it's so hard, not only for the consumer to try to figure out where those items go, but for the composter as well. But since that law has come into effect, we can now easily identify what packaging is compostable. There are 3 cups here. What can you tell about these cups right away? They have green bands on them, right? This is an identification that says this is compostable, and this has been certified. So our team sees those cups in our compost stream, they know that's compostable, and they just put it through the stream. What about those containers? They look like plastic, but what color are they? Those are paper, but look at the plastic-looking containers. Right here. They're certified compostable because that entire item is a green color. Now, our composters, our facility team members are trained to easily identify things by the color alone. So that should be a helpful tool for you as well. The color alone. If it is not an obvious paper product, like a napkin or a paper plate, then treat it with the color and the compostable packaging guidelines. But that is a paper box. Mm-hmm. Now, just a little background information about composters. There are many different types of composters. There's windrow, there's aerated static pile, there's in-vessel. Cedar Grove, we are an in-vessel composter, which I'll go into our process in a second. but that means our piles are covered with a big jacket. This helps us keep the heat in and retain that heat for longer periods of time. So for this reason, we can take a lot more material than other composters, like compostable packaging, as I mentioned. And how that material, your cups and your forks, get tested is our third-party certifier gets that material. They quite literally dig up the compost piles, put them in the compost piles, and they monitor how well they break down in certain phases. The point is to have that material fully broken down in 60 days. If it does not pass this, it does not get certified. So there's many certifiers doing their due diligence to make sure that material breaks down. Okay, now to the fun part. Here's our composting facility. This is in Everett. It looks very simple, and composting is very simple. We just do it on a massive scale, which means we have to be up to date with all of our technology because it's very high tech. First, our truck comes. They dump the compost container. What are the 2 colors you want to look for, or the 3 colors you want to look for compost containers? Beige, brown, and green. Perfect. We dump it. We take it to our facility where it all gets dumped out in the tipping building. Now, this is when our tipping monitors, they go and they remove obvious contamination. So this would be a plastic bag or a tire or a propane tank. You'd be surprised the things that show up at our composting facility. We have a joke at our facility that if it's found in your backyard, because remember, we get residential waste. If it's found in your backyard, it will end up at our facility. And we've had to pull out punching bags. We've had to pull out a grill, lots of things. So we have contamination specialists that pull out that obvious contamination. Now, we have found that a lot of contamination comes from within the green compostable bags. So that's when somebody accidentally puts a chip bag or a water bottle in the compost. So that material will go through our process. So we have to have the metrics to be able to remove it on the back end. But before we remove all the obvious stuff, we then mix that food waste with wood waste. So composting, it is a recipe. It's like baking a cake. You need 30 parts carbon, wood, to 1 part nitrogen, your food waste. So for every 1 truck of food waste, we need 30 trucks of wood waste. That's why we accept a lot of wood waste from landscapers and things. This is to help create a healthy environment for that bacteria. So after we mix it, we then grind everything up. Now, this is a very essential step in our process. This is what's not happening at the landfill. Because when you send things to the landfill, it all gets piled up, right? It doesn't get oxygen to breathe. This allows us to make the material small so that oxygen particles can go through the material. Now, even though this is so important, this is also a very detrimental step in our process. Because if 1 glass bottle goes through that grinder, it will bust into 1,000 pieces. And have you ever tried to remove glass from dirt? It is so hard. So when we find glass present in a load, we have to reject the entire load. And that is because our material, the compost, your waste, goes back into the community in a lot of ways. So after we grind it up, we put it on a conveyor belt where we then take it to where it's going to be piled up. There's a lot of things happening here. We are relocating it. We are mixing it. We rehydrate it, meaning we have little pipes along the way that add water in. And there's a magnet all along this conveyor belt that picks up hidden metals. So that could be metal forks from the cafeteria or nails from a wooden pallet. We pick up that material, or we magnetize it, collect it, and then it goes out to be recycled. So then we pile it up in our massive piles. These are 164 feet long, 10 feet tall, and 26 feet wide. It's about 1,000 yards of material in one pile alone. We pile them up, and then we cover them with a jacket. So same reason when you put a jacket on when you go outside. It's to keep the body heat in and to keep the moisture out because we want to be able to control that. We put that jacket on, and it's in the first phase for 21 days. It sits there. The food waste will have broken down in the first 48 hours. 48 to 72 hours, that food waste breaks down. And the temperatures get to about 160, 180 degrees Fahrenheit by themselves. The only thing we add is oxygen and water to these piles. It sits there for 21 days for the first time. We move these two first rows are the first phase. We move it over to second phase. We want to introduce more oxygen, and it's a really big pile. So there's pockets that get hotter than others, so we need to be able to distribute that heat. Then we move it again for phase 3. We rip those jackets off so they can cool down because they're so hot. And then finally, we screen the material. So this is when all of that compost goes through those screens, and we collect all those hidden plastics that might be in there. We also have fan suction points to collect film plastic. Since film plastic is lighter, when we flip the material over on our conveyor belts, the film plastics rise. We have fan suction points to collect those. Now, our process is pretty good. We can remove about 85 to 90% of the contamination. However, there's still about 5%, 5 to 10% that is extremely difficult to remove. One thing that is almost impossible for us is something as small as fruit stickers. They roll up, they go through our screens, and they weigh the same as compost. So something that small is considered contamination. And when we get reports, we really rarely ever get reports about our product, but when we do, it's always on fruit stickers. And we're like, listen, if you see what we started with, this would be pretty impressive. But this is what the material looks like. It's a dark, rich, nutrient-dense product that goes back into the community in so many ways. We work with students. Every school we haul for, that's the entire Seattle Public School District, the entire Kent School District, Auburn, and many schools and many districts in Pierce, King, and Snohomish County. Every school gets up to 10 yards of compost for free every year, just so they can utilize a product they helped create and create gardens and really keep that full circle story within their school. We work with farms. We have our own farm in Redmond that we grow over 100 different varieties of certified organic produce. We work with landscapers, lots of different ways. And we sell the product. So Home Depot, Lowe's, go get your own recycled waste over there. Now, time-wise, I'm just going to briefly go over some benefits. My favorite benefit is monetary savings. So in Seattle, it's not the same for every city, but in Seattle, composting is significantly cheaper than garbage. Why is composting cheaper? Does anybody know? Okay. It's a recycled product, so you're not, when you send things to the landfill, what happens? It gets bigger and bigger, so they charge you for that land. You pay environmental fees when you send things to the landfill. And so that's one thing. We don't have environmental fees because it's constantly, that material is being constantly processed and made into something that goes back into the community. And also, transportation. King County has a landfill that's almost full, basically full, but most of Washington's garbage goes to Oregon on a rail car. So it goes out of state, and so there are transportation fees. We are a local company. We're in Maple Valley and Everett, so your transportation fees are so much more limited. So those are some big reasons why it's really important to compost, because if you divert most of your organic waste, you can make your garbage smaller, your garbage can smaller, which then saves you money. Fun things. It can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It reduces landfill waste. Because it's so nutrient dense, it can completely revitalize soil health. For example, our farm I mentioned, we wanted to show the world in 2017 how amazing composting is. So we took 65 acres of fallow ground, nothing was growing for about 7 years out in Redmond, and we returned it into full production just using Cedar Grove compost. So 2017, we laid the whole thing with compost, didn't do anything with it, just let the rain kind of wash that compost into the ground. Did the same thing in 2018. 2019, we layered it with compost, tilled it just a little bit, and then started planting. Now we have a full functioning farm that has over 100 different varieties. So it can completely replace chemical fertilizer. But one of my favorite things, just because it's so fascinating to me, is that compost is now being used to filter chemicals in stormwater runoff, which is like, I can't even explain the science behind that. It's due to the nutrients. But our biggest customer of compost is Washington State Department of Transportation. Anytime they build a new road or do construction, they buy our compost to line the roadways with it. So when it rains and that water hits our cars, hits our tires, hits the roadways, gets all those chemicals in that water, it will go into the compost berms, be filtered out before it hits the waterways. So your recycled waste is directly affecting the health and the life of salmon here in Washington. It's incredible stuff. So there are so many amazing benefits to composting, and we're so excited that it's now law. It's very daunting because a lot of people don't know how to do it, don't know what happens to it, but we're excited about this. And these are kind of some next steps for you guys. I know you already have an amazing compost and recycling program out here, so making sure you're utilizing your leaders, the signage that's provided for you to really identify what is accepted. And your dining staff is already doing an amazing job providing compostable packaging, so you're pretty set on that regard. But yes, I think I'm going to end here. I'm not sure what our time frame is now, so.
Well, since Recology's not here, you're doing fine. And I think between you and Barbara and me, we can answer questions any of you have about composting or recycling.
Okay.
I'm just curious, what are the jackets made out of?
So they are made out of Gore-Tex material, so same thing as a Patagonia, North Face, or what have you. We do get a lot of questions about plastics, microplastics from our jackets. Unfortunately, it's really hard to capture the microplastics that are coming from the jacket specifically. So they are really important to our process, and they do help us create a quality product. But as far as any microplastics coming from the jackets, it's hard for us to be able to capture that. That was the jackets that we put over the compost piles. Yeah. Yeah. It's my jacket. Yeah.
I'm a big tea drinker, and I think the last time you were here, you mentioned something about tea bags, and I just want a clarification on that. Could you please go over that again?
Yeah. So we used to accept any kind of tea bags back in the day. So if you have our old signage, it has tea bags on there. We have since found out that a lot of tea bags have microplastics in them. So that is something that we no longer accept, the tea bag in the compost. Now, if you'd like to do your due diligence, rip that tea bag open and dump those tea leaves, that would be great. But that's such a tedious thing to do. I will say a trusted brand that we know that the bags have been tested is Bigelow. So I don't know what brand you use here, but Bigelow has certified tea bags that are free of microplastics.
What about boxes of bakery stuff that has food left over, of course, from rolls and so on? It's brown. Oh, I haven't checked to see if it's marked compostable, but they're in all the stores. Are those compostable?
It depends what the box looks like. Is there a plastic window?
Yes.
Well,
Well,
then-
there is a window. It looks like paper, like a clear paper. Is that plastic?
If it's a clear window, it's most likely plastic.
Okay.
So that right there is something we wouldn't want
Okay.
in our compost stream. But there are still several bakeries and donut shops that have brown boxes that have no plastic windows. It's just a fully brown box. That would then be treated as what's similar to that. What is another item that is a brown box that you can put in the compost? Pizza box, right? You can put pizza boxes in the compost. So if that brown box is similar to the pizza box where there's no plastic windows, that's something you can most likely put in the compost.
Barbara, get up.
Barbara, help.
If you wanted to look up whether your particular brand of tea has microplastics in the bag, should you be able to find that online by typing the name of that tea company into your phone?
I doubt tea companies will tell you willingly that there's microplastics in their product. What I recommend is our certifier, Compost Manufacturing Alliance. They have a great website that has all of the products they've certified. So that is a website, that is a great resource for you to use to look up if your those tea bags have been tested.
Would that website be on this paper that you give out, or I guess I can get that?
Yeah,
from
I can
Nancy.
follow up with Nancy and
I'll put it
send
in Eco News.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. That goes for any packaging items. If you have questions on baking sheets, cups, what have you, you can look them up.
Do those jackets get used more than once?
Oh, yeah, we have them for decades, for years. Yeah. We try to use them as long as possible, but the sun bleaches them, so we have to get new ones.
Do you have any recycling questions? So if we asked you questions, would you have the answers? We can go the opposite way.
Slightly off topic. Bio bags. Okay, so we've got the green ones that we use. I get black ones. They're bio bag product for poop, dog poop, except I have cats. So I figure rather than putting all the cat stuff in plastic bags and putting them in the garbage, I'm using the bio bag. But do you have any comment on whether that black one really is, or I just have to examine it carefully?
I'm not sure, to be honest. Bio bags are a trusted brand in the sense that they make really great quality compostable bags. So, but as far as anything that doesn't follow, I'm in the composting side. So if it doesn't follow the composting regulations, if it's black, then it's a garbage item, right? Whether that's better than a plastic bag, I don't know. It could just be the same. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Right. So
But you put it in the trash though, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No, and actually, it's just the corn litter.
Okay. Yeah, but still animal byproduct all should be going into the trash. Yeah. Pet waste.
After you were here the last time, we found that the clamshells that were being, I think you identified that the white clamshells that appeared to us to be paper could not be used at Cedar Grove. And a lot of times, white clamshells, things come in white clamshells, not any longer at Rising House. But how does one know? Because as I recall, is it better just not to put them in? Because they look like paper. But apparently, whatever was being used in the process of making those was a no-no.
Right.
So is it best just to not put them in?
This is very tricky. So I'm going to try to keep it as simple for you. Your dining team is doing a great job investing in these items that are Washington State compliant. Now, that being said, just because it's Washington State compliant doesn't mean that it can break down in our compost process. So as I mentioned, there are many different types of composters. There's windrow, there's aerated, there's in-vessel. We are in-vessel. Sometimes there are products that just simply cannot break down in an in-vessel process. Just like there are some products that just simply cannot break down in a windrow. That's because we have different temperature points and we have different time frames. Windrow is a longer composting process with lower temps. In-vessel is a short time frame. It's 45, 60 days, but higher temps. So when I was here last, there's some items that are just simply struggle to break down in our process. Those would be the clamshells. However, if you have items that follow the Washington state law, we just say, just put it in the compost. So you can, because your dining staff will continue to invest in items that work. They will continue to do that. So really, what we need from you all is a behavior change to start putting these items in the compost. So when it comes to those clamshells, I believe the white ones, that they looked white, they still had BPI on them. Do they not? Do they have like a BPI certification on them?
No, and we don't have them anymore.
And you don't even have them anymore. See, your dining staff is already
Because
doing the best.
they were problematic. You did test them and they didn't break down.
Okay. Okay.
In places outside of Horizon House when you get clamshells.
Okay. Yeah. If it does not follow the Washington state labeling law, then we would say just throw it away in the trash. But that's awesome you don't even have them anymore. The dining staff is the best.
Mine's a recycling question. Nancy, you probably can answer this, or Barbara, yeah. Envelopes with the windows inside, are we supposed, I know, to remove the cellophane or whatever it is?
Recology's answer to us was that Seattle Public Utilities, who contracts with Recology, told Recology they have to accept the windows, but they're not recyclable. So what I do personally is I'm just nice to Recology. I remove the window. It doesn't take but 2 seconds, and then I recycle the paper. That's what I do. Oh. Does that help? So to be nice, remove it. To reduce costs, remove it. To reduce contaminations. Thank you for asking. I don't know if any of you have seen the PowerPoint that's been running in the Fireside Lounge that I created. So I put on there some of the most common things that we find. Barbara can probably speak to the most common ones that are problematic. One of the ones I put in there was shredded paper. I was telling Sierra earlier, about 2 months ago, I had about an hour-long conversation with one of the shredding companies in the area. And boy, what I learned about shredded paper was really disturbing. I asked her to come speak here, but then the company got sold.
That's how it goes.
Shredded paper is going to end up in landfill, so please don't use the shredder in the mailroom. If you don't have to, you can always cross out personal information and then recycle the whole piece of paper. So shredded paper, for the most part, will end up in landfill. Only sometimes can it be recycled, and it's very restrictive when that happens.
Does every bit of food need to be removed from items that are to be recycled? Specifically, peanut butter plastic jars that say they can be recycled, but it's awfully hard to get every bit of peanut butter out of them.
What I do with that is I use a paper towel and I wipe out the jar. I can then compost the paper towel, right? And then I put the glass jar in the recycling. I have a pretty easy time getting it all out of there with paper towels. So.
Yeah, that's a great habit.
I don't use plastic peanut butter jars. I only use glass peanut butter jars.
Yeah, that's a great habit. Anytime you have any kind of jar or container that has food waste in it, just grab a napkin, scoop it out, put that in the compost. I would say if you're well, that's up to you guys.
It depends on how much peanut butter's in that jar, because the oil can clog up the drains. So it's best to get as much peanut butter as you can by hand out of it. They don't want oils down the drains.
When somebody was talking also, though, about washing, is a lot of people, I'm one of those, have only 1 or 2 people in their household, and they want to use a dishwasher but to save water, but they don't want to be washing all these things individually. When I do a load of dishes, a lot of times it has recycled items in it that are just being washed out is another item in the dishwasher. There's space there for it. It's pretty much empty, but I just throw it in the dishwasher. If it melts a little bit, who cares or whatever, but usually then I can throw it in the recycling. And I just want to mention something about recycling. If it's clean and dry, it's clean and it's dry, you're not sure if it can be recycled, go ahead and put it in the recycling because it's not going to contaminate anything. When she was mentioning pizza boxes, that box could actually contaminate other things because it's got oils in it. And now you're adding oil, and now all the newspaper could get oil in it. And now it's not just that one item that can't be recycled, but everything it touches. So when it is contaminated, it either has to go in the landfill if it can't be composted or in the compost. If it's clean and dry and you're not quite sure, you can throw it in the recycling. It's not going to contaminate anything.
So Barbara's got a great point. It's the contamination that messes up recycling, the contamination of food, water. So clean and dry.
Question on plastics recycling is it's really unclear which plastics can be recycled and which can't. What about, yogurt tins? What about bottles which have paper on it, which is very hard to get off?
Both those can be recycled.
I have a helpful tip for you. If the plastic is easily tearable, or you can poke your finger through it, do not put it in the recycling. Because you don't have film plastic recycling here, correct? No. You just have mixed commingled. So, for example, can you easily tear open a chip bag? The idea is to be able to tear open the chip bag, right? So if you can tear it open, that's a hard to recycle item. So that's garbage. Cellophane. If you have something wrapped in plastic, can you poke your finger through that plastic? Yes. So for that reason, that is a hard to recycle item. So that would be trash. So how to tell the difference between your plastics? If you can knock on the plastic container, you can't easily tear or poke your finger through it, go ahead and put it in the recycling. So it's a yogurt container, a water bottle, a plastic clamshell after it's rinsed out. Those are recyclable items. Now, if you have a chip bag, cellophane, something that's a Ziploc bag, those are all things you can easily tear, easily poke your finger through. That's garbage. Is that helpful?
Does that help, Tom? Poke or tear?
Poke or tear, bad. Knock, good.
What to me was a new discovery was recently Nancy put in the Eco News part of the alert that unlike what we'd been told before, that the numbering system matters to, I guess, Recology. And so all of a sudden, and it seems to me that what I've discovered, because it's very hard sometimes to read those numbers. I think I've got to get sometimes a magnifying glass to do so. But the odd numbers seem to be acceptable, but the even numbers are not. And what astounded me is like a distilled water bottle is a 2 or some number, and a very sturdy over-the-counter vitamin bottle is also an even number. So I thought that was very interesting, and but Nancy would know if I'm correct or not.
I cannot speak to that.
Partly correct. I think that the main thing to think about is exactly what Sierra was talking about. If you can poke your finger through it, if you can, easily tear it, it's not recyclable. The other thing with recycling plastics, so much of it is said to be recyclable, but it isn't ended up being recycled. So what I try and do is just avoid plastic as much as possible. Hard to do, I know.
Regarding plastics, should the screw-on tops of a plastic bottle, if they're plastic, be left on or thrown away?
If the cap is the same material as the bottle, then keep it on and toss it in the recycling. If the cap is a different material, so sometimes you can get a glass jar with a metal lid, take that cap off, and then you have a loose cap. Where would you put that loose cap?
Garbage.
In the garbage.
It's called mixed materials. So if you're putting something in, there's a combination of mixed materials, you don't want to recycle the mixed materials. There's a slide in the Fireside Lounge about that particular thing, about mixed materials.
You're on it.
We try.
I got one. Several things. One, the things like yogurt containers. Some yogurts, like for example, Chobani, they actually have a slit down the side and you can take the label off very, very easily. And yeah, I've seen people throw into recycling with the cover on it. I don't think you're supposed to do that because they made it on purpose so you could take it off. But for plastics that you have to do a little more work, are you allowed to leave the labels on? I always try to take them off every plastic I recycle.
That's nice.
Yeah, okay, but you don't
You
have.
don't have to, no,
Okay.
but that's a kind thing to do, which gets to the item of about size of paper. Recology doesn't want paper that's less than 3 inches.
Yeah,
So think about that, a little Post-it note, a little one, it's garbage.
yeah,
So
okay.
if you're tearing up paper, which I sometimes do if it has information on it that I don't want people to see, I just rip it in 2 pieces, 8.5 by 11 paper, so it's still easily within the size that Recology wants.
Okay. I got 2 more things. One is when you were talking about plastic, I was told that if you can like stretch it with your fingers, that you can put that in the plastic bag recycling at the grocery store rather than having to throw that away. And it goes to somebody called Ridwell, and they make decks out of it.
Yeah, so they have a film plastic recycling at grocery stores, which is why I asked if you had it here too. So if you have plastic bags and you collect them, you can take them to certain grocery stores and they will have a collection point for you. Just, it's not as common across Seattle when it's at commercial buildings like this. So it's just a step you'd have to go out of your way to recycle.
And then is the reason that shredded paper is so evil is because of the dyes in the paper? Because
it's the size and it's the hidden plastics. So it's due to the size, it is hard to recycle, and due to the hidden plastics, it's hard to compost.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, well, you know where to find us. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.